Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to the panelists. I'm so excited to talk about this topic. As you guys all know, this is near and dear to my heart. And I just wanted to kick us off really briefly and say that the idea for this panel kind of came out of a session that Yvonne gave last fall when we were in Cascais. So this same conference when we were in Portugal, where she was talking about the idea that when someone is doing when a group is doing a research journal, essentially what you're doing is you're building a community. You're building a community of people who are passionate about a topic, a community of people who are practicing in same ways, in different contexts especially, and also how extremely fascinating and stimulating it is to see the global connections that are built there. So I thought it would be really great to bring a few other folks who are working on this topic and to take this idea of global community and really translate it into sort of the workflows and nitty-gritties of building and growing and advancing a research journal. So we're going to get started really quickly. We're not doing too many journal presentations, but this is a slide. If you were here for Saad's presentation, you saw, DC journals are growing rapidly. They've always been a cornerstone of digital commons. Right now, we've got over 500 institutions using DC journals, over 3,000 journals on DC across 40 countries. And DC journal content itself has reached over 500 million downloads. So that's, it's really that global part of it is really built into some of this juice. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to the panelists, and we'll start with Diana. We'll have a few short introductions of each journal, and then we'll have a discussion. Okay, over to you, Diana. And do you want to stand up?
I can sit.
Yeah, either one.
As long as I can see the screen.
Oh, yeah.
And will you, okay.
Yeah, I can.
Do you want me to use the clip? I can.
Yeah, why
Oh,
don't you stand
let me come up. I'll stand up.
The screen is flickering off.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Let me just grab my glasses just in case. On that stage where I forget. Well, hi everyone. It's great to be here with my panelists and Pramita, who I've been working with for a while. I just wanted to share a brief background about the Journal of International Women's Studies, which I founded way back in 1999 when I was working at a small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, and I was directing a women's center, and I was also on the faculty in the Department of Anthropology, but I did notice that there was this gap between the women's center activities and actions oriented around feminist transformation and the department, which was mostly about scholarship. And for those who are involved in any kind of feminist thought, there's a relationship between scholarship and activism. So I thought that in founding an online open access journal, I could bring a community of people together across the world by building an international editorial board and publish articles that are related both to feminist thought as well as feminist transformation for a gender-just world. In 2000, I went to Bridgewater State University in Eastern Massachusetts, and I brought the journal with me. So there is the sort of cover of the journal. We have a little note up to our authors. But essentially, the journal is very multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. We address that interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity in multiple ways in our publications. So we allow many forms of citations because we want to be inclusive, and different disciplines have different ways of citing references, so that's just one way of being inclusive. We also bring together scholars, activists, policymakers, students. We encourage students to publish. And we have a sort of gender-just mission that we seek to implement through the process, what is called the workflow here, of producing each edition. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit. Our essential objective is to build bridges, in part across the publishing world. An open access journal, as you know, reaches people in places where it's difficult to get print journals, and also, who goes to the library and brings a stack of print journals anymore? That's what I used to do, right? So this is just a quick review of what the last slide said. And I think one of the things that I just want to point out is in seeking to build community, a sort of global feminist community, we interrogate feminisms. We want our authors to bring in the feminist scholarship that's local to their areas, the people who are change makers in their spaces, rather than reverting to the names and theorists that everybody's familiar with. So moving quickly, and I'm moving through this quickly so we can have a conversation afterwards. What I mean by feminist workflow is a number of things that are outlined here. First, the review process involves what we call a feminist ethic of care and bringing awareness of feminist scholarship that's global. So we also support a number of different revisions. So when I was a graduate student and early career professional, I was often devastated by rejections, and we want to build a community where people feel that there's a possibility to publish. So the way that we do that is by not only doing a first level of review and then sending it out for blind review, but once the revisions come back, working very closely with authors, helping them almost on a line-by-line basis. It's very labor-intensive, but it moves people, especially students, into a place where they are publishing feminist scholarship. Feminist writing, it has a whole history, and so I'll just note right now, and again I can talk about it more, but I'll note right now that it involves lived experiences. That theory grows out of one's life, one's experiences, and therefore, the subjective I is important in writing rather than a kind of removed universal passive voice. So we encourage and teach feminist writing in our reviews, in that kind of mentorship. Let's see, I'm sort of going to skip ahead to the point number 5. We've just spent many months actually almost 2 years, developing an inclusive language style guide, which hasn't yet gone live because we involved our very extensive global editorial board in sharing the chart that is that inclusive language guide, because we don't know what's inclusive in all parts of the world. So, for example, I got feedback from many of our South Asian scholars on how to use inclusive language around caste, for example. Things that some of us might have known, but not known in depth enough to respond to local situations. So that is something that we're rolling out soon. Also, as we got our royalties from people downloading our articles from index sites, we put those royalties back into a fellowship program. We thought that reflected a feminist ethic because we want people in places where it's difficult to get funding to do research to be able to have some seed money to be able to follow through on their feminist scholarship. So we have a fellowship committee, and we then decide on 2 or 3 different research grants per semester. Just going to show you a very quick insight into a 3-month period of downloads. The journal is doing very well. We have over 5 million downloads, and at this time, 800,000 something in the last year alone. And that's just a more close-up. I love this Google map. I don't know. I follow it and become inspired from it, and use it also to see where we need to develop our publishing outreach, maybe even seeking special issues, such as in South America. We do have downloads in South America, mostly in Brazil, mostly in Brazil, actually, but other parts as well, sometimes in Guyana and Suriname. But we published a couple of special issues in Spanish and English, and that seems to have led to increasing numbers of downloads. So we use the tools that are available to us through the manage the journal submissions in order to strategize about how to create a more inclusive journal space. And I'll just leave it at that for now, and hopefully you'll have some questions that I can respond to later. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to sit, then go ahead and sit, or would you prefer to stand?
I'll stand.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah,
Why don't you stand
you
like
can
this?
use that.
No, does it go to the next one? Ah, yes, I see it. All right. So I don't need this. Well, thank you for being here. I'm happy to be here. I see a lot of overlap and similarities with our journals, and I wish I had taken notes, but I guess I will learn more later. I had a few things that I think we could learn from our journal, but so much that was overlapped. Just to remind you, the Maya that we're talking about are the Maya Amerindian or Native American peoples that originate from Mesoamerica. Something was wrong. There was a pre-slide. That is the slide. So the Maya world. The Mayan language is what initially connects the groups of the Maya together, dating back some 5,000 plus years ago. So these are truly ancient civilizations. The Maya still live in these areas. They also have come in large numbers to the United States, to Mexico, Canada, and around the world. We didn't go to the Maya. I never had in my mind that I would someday create a journal about the Maya, although my academic expertise was Latin American history, and particular with Central America, Mexico, and Guatemala. Still had not planned a journal, but the Maya came to us. We didn't go to them through migration. In the 80s, 90s, 2000s, there were hundreds of thousands of people from the Maya indigenous areas, particularly of Guatemala. So we began something at Kennesaw University we call the Maya Heritage Community Project. It started as a class project in my History of Mexico class. It was so widely accepted by faculty, students, and staff that it became a campus-wide organization. Service learning was the initial idea, and then it became more like we learn from the Maya. Instead of doing a service, it became more academic, them doing us service. The next thing, the Maya Project, though, became an improved Coverdell Peace Project, peace program. The people connected to or had been in the Peace Corps program, they could come back to the university and get some special help. We had this program at Kennesaw. The Maya Project was the first of these programs that was approved by Washington, D.C. It became an approved Peace Corps program. So I had a number, sometimes 5 or 6 graduate students working in the program. A lot of them out of the business school, out of the nonprofit places. So we began working in Guatemala as well through internships for our students, study abroad. It was the Maya Project then, and the Maya Project plus the Peace Corps that led us to the journal itself. It was all integral and grew from the bottom up. Our main focus above all the others was trying to connect this idea of lived expertise with academic expertise. not wanting to be another staid, boring academic journal that very few people read. We wanted it to be a journal for the Maya, about the Maya, but in partnership with the Maya. But how do we claim academic expertise, or we fit academic standards? Academic customs, I see I get messed up by costumbre, by Spanish. I mix Spanish and English with customs. But we also work with the idea that we don't want to be a researcher studying a group of people as an object. We don't want to think of them or treat them or leave them out as just a mere point of study. Some of the things that we have done over the top, we've done special issues on migration, on tamales, on agroecology is coming up, education, law, migration stuff, cosmology, the whole thing coming out on Maya princes, health, U.S. relations. We've done a lot of different things. This particular cover was a focus on climate change in Mexico and Central America. Where we're headed is looking at what is it in Maya knowledge, or for that matter, in American Indigenous or Native American knowledge and wisdom that fits well with our needs of the 21st century in our modern world. One of them we thought was with health or with climate, with the health of the earth, with the health of the people, and with the very deep, ingrained Maya concept of cosmology, that we are not strangers as individuals on Earth. We are all interconnected with all living things and non-living things. So this is where the journal has been moving. And I might just go back. One last thing, just going back to here. You notice that this picture shows some animals that were European, who were not indigenous to the Americas, the cows, the goats, etc. But it's mixed in Guatemala, and we're thinking, this is the reality of our world, so how can we make better of this concept? Also, the young person there is the future, and Guatemala is changing very fast, as is all the Maya areas. Some of the older people are still fighting the battles of racism or economic hardship. The young people we have seen tend to just want to fit in. They want to be accepted. So also, one last thing is note that Guatemala is a very beautiful country. It was a lot more beautiful when I first went there, I think, in 1974. And it's still beautiful, but it has been damaged tremendously, like many other parts of the world, by climate change. and by some other factors as well, so-called modernization, etc. But there's still a lot there to save, and the Maya people are the ones who, in a sense, have kept this as it is in many of the regions. Not willingly in many parts, but because they were isolated. So that's enough for me.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Pramita, for inviting me to this, because I love talking about community building. And I'm going to use the journal that I started in collaboration with A2RU, the Alliance for the Arts and Research Universities, as an example for community building. We are a very new journal. We are just finishing up our first issue on artificial intelligence and possible futures for the arts. And we're about to launch our second issue on ruptures and rebirths, reimagining the arts in the age of computational reproducibility, which is the big, quite visible elephant in the room, including AI, social media, and so on. So, what's important to note about this journal is that it is meeting a niche and a need that hadn't been there until actually quite recently. It's a COVID story. So in the height of COVID, I'm a learning technologist, and as you can imagine, during COVID, when everything shut down, the world just kind of exploded in the arts, and the arts here are defined very widely, including the visual and performing arts, architecture, design, film, theater, music, and so on, dance. So for many of these fields, there really is no adequate substitute for in-person mentorship. But the faculty I was working with, they were forced to innovate and to keep on dancing, to keep on providing, theater and live performances in some ways to keep their arts alive. And so as I was working with them, I kept on asking them, like, wow, you are doing such amazing creative work, thinking outside the box, doing what artists and designers do best, being creative and thinking through possible solutions. And I said, well, have you considered publishing these innovations that you are doing within your sometimes century-old traditions? And the answer was invariably, one, I haven't ever thought about it. Two, that sounds like it might be a really good idea. And 3, where should I publish this? Can you give me, the names of some publications where I can go? So it wasn't there. And so with that, I went to the Alliance for the Arts and Research Universities, a network that is primarily based in North America, but has some tentacles into South America and Europe. And we started Tradition Innovations in Arts Design and Media Higher Education. Right from the beginning, I thought of it as something that would have no budget whatsoever. So that might sound like a very radical idea, but it's absolutely been central to creating the kind of community that we've been able to create. Of course, when I say 0 budget, it doesn't mean that there's no money at all. Somebody obviously pays for the DC platform, right? UNLV libraries, but that was already a sunk cost, right? Somebody pays for the promotion and the networking to make it into a legitimate journal and to get contributions and to get the editorial board going, and that is A2RU. But that too is a sunk cost. The institutions that I was working with, we were already doing the work, but doing them separately. And so what I did is I connected the dots in order to make it possible for people who are volunteers, people who are not getting paid extra, but are dedicated about the work. And the fact that it's a Diamond Open Access journal that is entirely run by volunteers, that provides the legitimacy that allows us to grow. I will skip through so that we have time to talk. So, yep, okay. I might go back, yeah, if I need, okay. All right, so we've had global reach. We do not have 5 million, right? But we are just a few years old, and we've had 12 contributions. And so we're very proud of the fact that we are very close actually to 10,000. As of this morning, it was 9,906 downloads. And I mean, for us, that's a big deal, especially because most of the contributors that we work with have never contributed to a journal before. They've never published in this way. They do not know what the process is, and they're often quite intimidated by the process. So the thing that I and the editorial board often have to do is a lot of emotional labor in order to get the community involved, in order to get the possible contributors, in order to tell the possible contributors that you have something interesting that people want to know about. And you can do it with our help. So I was very pleased to hear about the feminist workflow, right? And we do something similar to that in that we have multiple stages of peer review, where the peer reviewers, who are anonymous, provide extensive feedback on a first draft. We get a resubmission, and then in the resubmission, we help with the copy editing and editorial workflow. And in the end, we produce, because it's an arts journal, a beautiful PDF that is accessible. We really believe in ADA accessibility, so that we can go out in the world with confidence with what the contributor has created. Something else to note that is similar to what you talked about with the Maya journal. We're very much focused on the community that we have, the larger arts community, and their needs. And so we encourage creative contributions. We have published some traditional articles, mostly written with an abstract, but we encourage our contributors, would-be contributors, to come up with other solutions and think about how they would want to showcase what they know and what they have accomplished. And so we work with them based on the ideas that they have, and we come up with ideas. I can give you one particular anecdote that I thought particularly illustrates this. So one of our contributors made a podcast, a research podcast. Doesn't sound like that is a likely combination, and this is how it came about. The contributor is a voice performer. He's an actor and a voice performer, and he teaches podcasting. In the age of AI, particularly voice cloning, the work of voice actors were really the first ones to be affected by AI, even before generative AI was useful in other areas. Voice cloning already had become a thing, and that has accelerated. So here was, his name is Adam Paul. So here was Adam Paul. He is a subject matter expert with a decades-long career in voice acting. He has seen the impact of voice cloning, and he teaches podcasting. But his first contribution was an article that was in some ways awkwardly written. It was awkwardly written because he was trying so hard to express something that he thought was scholarly work. And so it was no longer his voice, and it didn't express what he could express. So the peer reviewers and the editorial board, when we saw this and when we connected the dots, here is a voice actor teaching podcasting. So we asked him to create a podcast based on what he was finding with voice cloning. And that has become the contribution that's been downloaded most last year. Especially for someone in the arts to have thousands of downloads of their work, that is highly unusual, right? So as a faculty member who is seeking tenure, this is a really, really big deal. And I really encourage you to listen to this podcast because it shows you what a real voice actor does and how voice cloning, what happens in voice cloning. And he talks about the uncanny valley and the theoretical concepts that go into voice cloning. It is absolutely fascinating, and we were so glad that we were not bound by the strictures and didn't feel the need that it had to be an article and that it had to look like something specific. So in many ways, it's probably connected to your projects and really opening up the idea of what scholarship and knowledge creation could be.
Wow, thank you so much for those insights. And it's so, I love the way that you all told the story of your journals. And I kind of want to pick up right where you left off, Yvonne, in terms of questions. It's all three of your journals are working really interdisciplinarily. Anthropology, history, women's studies, English, arts, practice. So one question I wanted to ask all three of you is how, working within the university system, where working interdisciplinarily can be very challenging, do you have any tips for, how did you get your project launched, your journal project launched, and support for it, or, how did you build support? And Diana, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, can you hear me? Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, I came to Bridgewater State University in the year 2000, and I negotiated my position actually by speaking about the journal because it was just the beginning of online open access publishing, and it was the first scholarly journal at the university. So the university was actually a state college that was moving into a university status, and it really was. So the context, I think, is important. So it was interested in creating spaces for scholarship, but also as a teaching university, what became a teaching university, they were also interested in finding ways to include students. So you talked about volunteers. We have an extensive internship program, and also in our graduate college, we have graduate student fellowships. So we've used both. So one of my colleagues, who's now an associate editor, created a copy editing class. And so students who excel in that copy editing class, it's both a joint undergraduate and graduate course, have an opportunity to become interns with the JIWS, and then their names are published on our website. Many of our students actually have gone into publishing careers as a result. So, and for our graduate students, it helps them actually to pay for their tuition. One of our graduate copy editors right now is very much involved in that. So when I first came to Bridgewater State, I thought about ways in which we could include students. So that was one way in terms of helping us with our workflow, and so they gained the skills of copy editing. The other was, of course, including students in publishing. So sometimes what we do is when we have a special issue, or even just in regular issues, we disseminate a call for papers to the chairs of departments and then ask them to circulate it among their colleagues who are teaching courses where the theme of the special issue, for example, might be of particular interest, and then they incorporate it in their syllabi. So, there are so many levels of it. So they might have an assignment that includes writing a journal article or a book review, because we have so many genres. We have not only scholarly articles, but we have more personal essays. We have something called feminist reflections, which are kind of like blogs where you don't need any citations. So it includes people who are just telling stories about their experiences in their lives. We've published art, we've published videos that then go up on YouTube. We have a whole literary section too. We've published poetry, theaters, the short stories. So we're just open to all kinds of submissions as long as they have a thread of feminist thought in it, which is very broad. So by opening it up at all these different levels and including the journal on syllabi, so in an English class, if students are learning how to write a book review, why not submit a book review or a film review to the JIWS? So that's one of the ways that we've been able to express our multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity using the different spaces at the university.
It's wonderful. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yes, well, the university in the beginning, the students, staff, the faculty, and the administration all seemed very enthusiastic about the Maya. It was an exotic advantage that we had in the beginning, is that the Maya suddenly were in Georgia and in our local area. And we were able to have meetings on campus where they gave talks about language, gave examples, and taught students some words to say. Many of them had some of their traditional clothing that they were able to wear. We had one group early on come and judge some displays that students made about the Maya archaeology, and they went around and judged them and told them some of the names they could pronounce correctly. It was then from 2007, 2008, 2009 that things began to go south. That is to the migration, the Maya, and immigrants in general were quite well accepted in the early days in Georgia. Workers were appreciated. Even some people working, say, small business owners would do proactive methods to bring people into the area. But we began a large anti-immigration backlash, and we had a few problems on campus where our then president tried to protect one of our students who turned out to be, and she was surprised to know, did not have legal documents. She was brought at a very young age. And there were a few problems like that, and the president, along with a couple other things, eventually had to resign, but immigration was a part of it. So it became more difficult. But still, we're not just at migration. As I told you, we did more and more things outside of Georgia, outside of the United States. But it was difficult based on that aspect.
Some of the local political
Yeah.
aspects. But on the other hand, it sounds like for what both of you are talking about is the interdisciplinarity. Actually, you were able to translate it into how it's creating a strategic impact for the university's mission, which is, and I think, Yvonne, you might have a different angle on that too.
I could say one thing very quickly, that is, I was already a full professor when I was working in this field. And if I'd been a junior professor or certainly non-tenured, it could not have happened. Because, especially in my field, history, which is very conservative. And that was, at the same time, people liked it. To run a journal or to be involved in a journal on campus was not rewarded, especially in editorialship, which is in our field considered just merely a service like anything else. They don't appreciate the creativity or the academic work that goes into it.
I talked a little bit about like how to get support. I'm a big believer in sunk costs and looking at connecting the dots. So already existing services, and what was absolutely key in all of this was actually that our library had digital commons and that they had an open access option. And a big shout out to Willie Thurlow, who's, my consultant. So that's the other part, because we're all volunteer. We absolutely depend on that support in order to give us a beautiful design. And in order to answer our questions. And it makes such a huge difference. I really believe that without DC, this journal wouldn't exist. And that also means that this community and this opportunity for artists, designers, media professionals who have never thought about publishing their work, getting their open access ideas out there, wouldn't be happening. So I'm deeply grateful.
Wonderful. I'm going to keep it with you, Yvonne. That was a lovely response, and I'm so touched with how you talked about so many folks on campus who wouldn't have had a research outlet, developed a research outlet, all three of you, through the work of the journal. I wanted to kind of switch a little bit and think about, as you're starting a journal, since you're the nearest to it, how did you go about, thinking through, the aims and scope, some of the skeleton of the journal, building that editorial board? What were the most challenging parts for you working with it as editor-in-chief, and then what were the things that came more easily? And then I'd love to hear from the rest of you as well.
So it's definitely a process. I'm not a professional publisher. I'm a learning technologist. I love talking with people. I love giving them a platform. And so it was a matter of connecting that love with finding
the right partners that will allow me to make it happen and to create a network. So once I had that conversation with A2RU, I could build an editorial board with their help. That was absolutely key, because if I had done it just within my university, it would have a local and regional impact, to be sure. Yeah. But with a right partner that has a national, international scope, at that point you get a lot more legitimacy and you can go a step further. So we've been going for a while, and now we're doing a very big step. We're applying for the Directory of Open Access Journals, and another shout out to Elsevier. This became realistic for us once I went to the Elsevier Impact Conference last fall, and I found out about the process, and the deputy director was right there, and I cornered him over lunch, and I talked about the process.
We'll get him to America next time.
Yeah, and so yeah, we're on the path, and with that, we're going to have an additional layer of professionalism. We were already doing 90% of what the DOAJ was asking for. And so over the past 6 months, we've been going over our policies, making sure that they're updated, making sure that they fit the COPE guidelines, the DOAJ guidelines, and looking at like international things, like for example the EU AI Act, about what's necessary in order to be sure that we have an international, it's possible for us to have an international presence. And so it is a journey, and for me it's a joyous journey, because at each step of the way, I don't think about like the mistakes that I made in the past. I think about the fact that I'm growing into the future with the help of the editorial board and with the help of my partners.
Awesome. And Diana, you've done you're also in DOAJ and Scopus, I know for sure.
We're in Scopus. We used to be in DOAJ, but we're not anymore. And one of the reasons we're not is because we have joint copyright. And one of the reasons we have joint copyright with authors is because that helps to support the funds that we get from copyright clearance. And we have a fellowship program that I mentioned, and we want to sustain that fellowship program. That's really important to us, to be able to fund research around the world. And also part of the requirements of that fellowship is that folks who are awarded will then contribute to the journal. That's for that reason. But one of the challenges that I'm facing is that as the journal has grown over the years, there have been certain parts of the world where it's become particularly popular. Nigeria is one of those places, and so is India. People in India read the journal a lot, and you can, and they're also members of the editorial board, and a lot of submissions come from India. And so, in fact, I just came back from India because I was invited to a university to give a workshop on feminist publishing based on my role in the journal, and the person who invited me, who was a professor at IST University in Andhra Pradesh, is also on the journal board. So there's been lots of facilitations of, I've given quite a bit of quite a few talks in various places that are related to the journal as a way to foster support. But there's also a lot of readership in Pakistan and in Sri Lanka, Nepal, throughout South Asia. We don't want to become, even though we love the support from and the readership, we don't want to become a journal of South Asia. We need to keep our international focus, and we get a lot of, I get a lot of letters from folks who want to join the editorial board as reviewers with a focus on South Asia. So it's been a bit of a balancing act for me to not want to turn people away, but also and want to support that readership and that those submissions that come from that part of the world, but also wanting to maintain interest and focus in other places as well. I'm still navigating that because over the years, in terms of a global community, I've really gotten to know people and work closely with them. And then finally I got to meet folks from India, but in other places as well. And when you have those personal relationships, as you were talking about as well, about the Maya Journal, those personal relationships, as an anthropologist, I think about kinship relationships all the time, and there's obligations, responsibility, and those are ultimately what's really important. And so finding a way not to undermine those, and at the same time thinking about the needs of the journal, is something that I'm navigating. So what we did was we created, at least for our executive board, a 3-year turnover. So that every 3 years, the book review editors, the film review editors, will rotate. But in terms of the editorial board, we haven't yet put on term limits, but we might. We'll see how it goes. For now, there's no reason to limit the membership of the editorial board. It's just a matter of also editorial board membership is important because we have a responsibility sheet. So if you're a member of the editorial board, you have some obligations. Reviewing a certain number of journals per year, doing outreach for the journal, being involved, and I have an email list for all our editorial board members, and I regularly engage them in decisions about policy or new genres. We just have a new genre for policy briefs. So I'm very cognizant of how to maintain engagement with people from various parts of the world, and then thinking through about how to do that.
That's fascinating. I had a couple other questions, but I think I want to hand it over to the audience for questions, because I know that there's going to be a lot of them, especially to think a little bit about how you work with your admin, your DC admin. And, we've got a great audience here, so maybe the expertise can come from our questions. So if there's any questions, I'd like to open it up. And if not, I have one. Ellie?
This wasn't exactly about the administrative side of it, but first, Pramita, thank you so much for organizing this panel. It's so heartwarming to have this conversation about the role of journals within digital commons, because we hadn't had very many sessions on that in this particular conference, but it has been a persistent theme in our work. That's how we got to 3,000 some journals in the first place, of course. And my thanks again to all of the panelists presenting today. I think one of the things that I'm really interested in, we were just talking about engagement and how readers are engaging with this work, and we've talked about downloads. I'm wondering what kind of word of mouth you might be receiving from your readership, and whether that's something that would be interesting to capture within your journals as sort of like responses to articles or as guest editors. If you're capturing anything, that the feedback from your readership about your innovative approaches to the journals you're publishing. I'm sure we'd all be, well, at least I'd be interested in that, and I wonder if your readership would as well. Thank you.
Yes, I'm really quite pleased, and I think the main reason I am able to stay on happily, even though I'm essentially retired, is that we get a lot of feedback from the young Maya in Guatemala, in Mexico, in the United States about how they enjoy the magazine, how they feel about having a place where they can explore their identity or hear other things. I've had email come in or submissions or communications, for example, saying that one that I saw not long ago was that he had published with us, and someone had called him from a language organization, and he ended up getting a job, and the job he still had 4 years later, and it's really quite a job. He's interpreting in his Mayan language. Another one was an adoptee woman at a university, actually in Nevada, who wrote and said, after reading some, I suddenly felt that I knew who I was. I was Maya. I was Maya American. And we hear things like that from people. So it's quite rewarding in that way.
Well, fantastic. I know there's lots of other questions, but I think we need to move on to the next session, and hopefully we can discuss during the break. Thank you so much. What a great session.